Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I'm from executeautomation.com and welcome to another video of our Selenium with Java sessions that we have been talking about. And in this series, we have been talking about the core Java concept so far. And this is going to be the last video of our core Java concept that we have been talking about for Selenium automation testing. I mean, you can use the same exact Java knowledge for Playwright automation testing as well. So in future, if I'm going to have a Playwright automation testing course, then probably I'll be just using the exact same playlist as a reference for your knowledge to move forward with the Playwright automation testing as well. So essentially, whatever core Java concept that we have discussed so far are going to be applicable not just for Java. It can also be used exactly the same way with Playwright as well, because Playwright with Java is going to use exactly the same Java, right? You can use Java 11, Java 21 or 22, doesn't matter. So you can just use the exact same language, same knowledge that we have obtained so far, and you're just going to implement the exact same thing with Playwright automation testing as well. Well, as that said, in this lecture, we are going to be talking about the core Java concepts last lecture, which is going to be the collection frameworks. So what is this collection frameworks basically? So essentially, collection frameworks or Java collection framework or JCF is a set of classes and interfaces that implements commonly reusable collection data structures. The primary purpose of the framework is to allow different types of collections to be handled in a consistent way. And this framework includes several useful classes and interfaces, each serving different purposes. That is the real power of this collection framework. Basically, if you just think about collections, it's going to be more like an array that we just talked in our non-primitive types in our earlier lectures of this session. And this collection framework is pretty much like an array, but it is going to have quite a lot of different operations in it. Like it's going to have like a key and value pair collection. It's also going to have something like an ArrayList, and it's going to have something like a HashMap and things of that nature. I mean, you can use quite a lot of different collections, but the problem that the collection framework is going to address is that how you're going to use all the different types of collections that are available in Java in a more consistent manner. And that's the real purpose of this Java collection framework. So using JCF, all the collection libraries are just like streamlined to use a framework like JCF, so that it always has going to have all these methods that you're going to be using for one collection and with another collection. That is the real purpose of JCF. Just think about collections for now as like an array that we just saw in our earlier lectures, and how we are going to be using these collection frameworks for storing the data. Well, as that said, you can see that this collection framework in a higher level is going to look something like this. It is going to have an interface called as iteratable, because all the collections that you are going to be seeing in this particular lecture are going to be iteratable, which means you can iterate through one collection, through another collections, and then through another collection. So that is what is iteratable means. And this iteratable is basically going to be the parent class of all the collections. And because you can see that this iteratable is in this color, which means it is basically like a brown color, and it's an interface. And similarly, this collection is also an interface, which is going to be implemented for these interfaces like set interface, list interface, and queue interfaces. And there is an abstract collection as well. And these interfaces are in turn, like the set interface, are in turn going to be implemented by the sorted set. And similarly, list is going to be implemented by an abstract list and abstract queue, and queue is implemented by the dequeue interface. And the last thing that you're going to be seeing all the way down below is going to be like, it's going to have a tree set, linked list, array list, vector, periodic queue, and stack. So these are the things which are pretty much like a collection that we are going to be using. So in a nutshell, all these diagram that you are seeing over here can be just jogged down something like this as I have defined over here. So you can see that list is basically going to be an interface in Java. And this interface is going to be implemented by two classes, ArrayList and linked list. So this is an collection. So ArrayList is basically going to be a collection, and linked list is also going to be a collection. And I'm telling you, to be honest, for automation testing, we may be mostly using this ArrayList quite a lot, because that is the only collection that you essentially require for storing any of the elements or data in it. When I say element, it is going to be like the web element, which you are going to be storing into an array list so that you can iterate through all the elements from the collection. So that is what is the array list collection that you're going to be using for storing those elements. And I'm telling you, this is the collection that you will be using most of the time. And similarly, there is something called as linked list. And once again, this is also a type of collection which is going to be storing the list of data as you are seeing over here. So basically, these collections can store different types of data in it. Like it can be an integer, it can be a string, and you can just mix and match all the types of data that you want to store. And based on that, it's going to store all the data for you. And another most important concept of this list, like array list and linked list, is that it can just store all the data in any order, which means there is no specific order that it maintains. So it's just going to store the data in any order that you're storing. And then you can retrieve the data from any order based on that. So you can just use the key value to specify what value that you're looking for. You can obtain that from there. And similarly, there is something called as a set interface, and it's going to store different it also is implemented by different classes like hash set, linked hash set, and tree set. So you can see that the hash set is basically going to store data in any order, but the linked hash set is going to store the data in a specific order. So it's going to store like this is going to be in this order array, and then you can only obtain the values based on those orders. So it's like an ordered list, and this is like an unordered list. And similarly, you also have got what is called as an queue interface, which is going to be implemented by the linked list and periodic queue, and map is going to be implemented by HashMap, LinkedHashMap, tree maps, and hash table. So it's going to be pretty much exactly where like HashMap is going to store all the unordered list, and then the LinkedHashMap is going to store everything in an ordered list like that. So it's going to store the data in specific order. So that's how all these data are going to be stored for you in these interfaces and in the classes. So hope it all makes sense to you at the moment. So that is how the collection frameworks are going to be. And in this demo of our session, we are going to be mostly focusing on the array list, and I'm probably going to talk about the hash map, but other collections are going to be essentially the same. And the way that you're going to be using it for the automation testing, I'm telling you, as I told you, ArrayList is mostly enough for you to understand for the collections as such. But if you want to go even more deep, understand even further, I would recommend you to go through some of the documentations or other videos in YouTube to understand how you can work with these collections. But while you come to automation testing, if you're not building like a very complex libraries, you may not be ending up using these kind of collections there. Well, as that said, let's start writing our own or implementing our own collections in our code. So for doing that, I'm going to go back to our code that we have been talking about over here. And I'm going to go to the project explorer. And over here, I'm going to start writing the collections. So basically, for writing the collections, I'm going to create another package, something like this. And I'm going to say collections. Maybe we can just even create a class. What do you think? So let's go and create a class, to be honest, because we're going to just talk about only one of the collections. So I'm just going to leave them as it is. And I'm going to say collection learning. And on this class, I'm going to start creating certain methods. So I'm going to say public, you know this very well, and I'm going to be accessing this method without creating an instance of our collection learning class, which means I need to make or mark this method as static. So I'm marking this as static. I want to return nothing at the moment. So I'm just put this void, and then I'm going to say the array list collection as the method name. And I'm just going to pass an array of all the names. So this is just going to be aligned with the learning that we have did before, because you know that every single time while you try to loop through any values, you use the for loop to do that, like how we did in our last lecture. And you can also pass the array using string array, something like this, to get the names like that, right? Like that is how you did in our last lecture. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do over here with the array list as well. But the only change at the moment over here this time is that what I'm going to do it is I'm going to not print the value like for loop like how we did before. Rather, I'm going to store all the names into a collection this time. So store all the names into an collection, which is nothing but ArrayList in our case. So what do you think, Karthik? Why do we actually need to do it? Because the names itself is an array and you are again storing the name as an array. It doesn't really make any sense. I got what you're saying, but guess what? The demonstration purpose, I'm just doing this one. Like array itself is a collection, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is. But I mean, array itself is going to hold all the values, but collection frameworks is going to give us even more flexibility to do things that you can't do that in the plain array. I'll tell you what are those features that the collection actually has got. So for instance, if I'm going to store all the names into a collection, and as I told you, I'm going to be using the array list, I can just specify the interface list here, and I'm going to say name collection as the variable is equal to, at this time, I'm going to use a new keyword once again, and I'm going to say array list. You see that now we're getting a scrolly line there. So if we just go hit this guy, it's going to say that import the array list util class. So I'm going to import that. So it's going to add the import java.util.ArrayList for me, which is cool. But how about this guy, the array, which is I'm getting an error there. So it says that import the list from java.util package. So basically both the array list as well as the list class and interfaces, both are coming from this package java.util. So you can either implement and import both the java.util as array list like that and the list like that, or as I told you, remember, you can just use an asterisk to do that. They are essentially going to be exactly the same thing. So it just imports both of them. But the array list, as you see there, is still throwing me an error. The reason why it's throwing me an error is that because you just have to complete the statement. That's the reason why I'm getting an error. But you see that now that I have defined an array list, something like this. So as I told you, remember in the slide, basically the list interface is implemented in the class array list. And if you don't believe me, how you can look at it is just right click. You remember the open declaration or open the implementation, you can go there. So if I just go open the declaration of this class file, it is basically gonna get to the class file of the Java, which is like decompiling it and getting into the actual class file. And this is the constructor of the array list. And if I just go to the class itself, like the array list class, which is still going there, you see that this is the array list class, and it is implements the list interface. So the list is basically an interface. See that it says I there, which means it is an interface. So any interface in Java, and it has an icon there as I, which means it is an interface for that class. And it says as ordered collection, where the user has a precise control over where the list of each element is inserted, and the user can access the element by their integer index and search for the element in the list. That's what the list is basically going to say. But the array list, on the other hand, is going to be a resizable array implementation of the list interface. It implements all the optional list operation, permits the element including the null, and it also has quite a lot of different methods that you can actually use within that particular array. But as I said, I'm not going to get into the details of that class itself. So let's try to use it and see how we can make use of them. So if I just gonna store any value into the collection, guess what we're gonna do? So you can just say name collection dot, you see that we're gonna get quite a lot of different method here. And these methods basically are the methods very specific to this particular collection. But because we are using the JCF, or otherwise called as the Java collection framework, it has now streamlined the way you can use these collections naming of the method, which means you always need to use the same name to store a value. For instance, add is the method name which you need to use for adding a and value to the collection. Similarly, if you're going to store the value in a key value pair, then you need to put the index and then you need to store the object there. And that's how like every single thing you're gonna be doing it, and that's all coming because of the JCF has got some structures there to do it. Well, as I said, I'm gonna store a value, so I'm gonna say add. And if I want to store the names, you remember you can just access the name using the index like 0, something like that. So that way it's going to be storing that 0 value into the collection. But I'm not going to do that this time. Guess what I'm going to do? I wanted to iterate through all the names and then store the value. And you remember, in order to iterate the value, we use this for each loop, like for each, where it's going to get all the names and it's going to store the value into the name variable, and then you can just use this name variable to get the name that you're looking for. That's exactly what I'm going to do here as well. So I'm going to say for, and I'm going to say var of name in the names collection array, which is this one, because array is also an collection basically. I'm going to store there, and then I'm going to say name collection dot add of the name. So basically I'm going to store the name on this collection. This is what I'm trying to achieve over here, and it's going to be storing all the value for me into this particular collection. And now I need to get the values out from this particular collection. So get the values out from the collection. So how do I actually do that? You remember all these collections were actually implementing the what is called as an iteratable interface. So basically they all need to have a method called as iteratable. So I'm going to say iterator. So basically you can just type what is called as an iterator like that, and then you can just put a string data type like that. I'm gonna say that iteration is equal to, so this is like how you store the value into the iteration, and then you're gonna say name collection dot, you see that there is something called as iterator. So basically this is going to iterate for me for all the elements that I have got over here. This is the iteration that you can use. And now you can use a while loop. You remember the while loop that we were talking about while we're trying to get all the values out of this particular collection, which is the array. Over here, because we have already iterated through, we don't really have to worry about the value that we have to like keep on counting or incrementing the value that we're looking for, because the iterator is going to do those things for me. So I can just say iteration dot has next element. So this is going to be like a condition of the while loop. You remember here we always say that while loop needs to have a condition, and then you loop through all the values over there, and then you increment it by setting all the value to 1, 2, 3 based on the number that you're looking for. And because I don't have to worry about incrementing the value, which is going to be taken care by the iterator for me, now all I have to do it is just set the iteration has the next, and then I just have to print that value from the iteration. That's all I have to do. So I'm just going to say system.out.println of the name is, and guess what, this time I'm just going to say iteration dot, and you see that there is something called as next method, which is going to get that next value for me. So hope that makes sense. So this is how you are going to be basically working with an collection, which is going to be the array list. And I think ArrayList is the better way for you to store all the values. I'll talk about the dictionaries, which is nothing but the maps, pretty soon. But you will notice that this is already quite awesome to work with a collection to store all the values and then iterate through the collection and then get the value out of it. Let's try to run this code and see how that actually works. So I'm going to go to the first program over here, and I'm going to comment all the looping code using the control slash. You remember that's the shortcut that we discussed. And over here, I'm gonna go to the collection learning dot, because we have made the method as static, you can just access the method ArrayList collection. And over here I have to pass the names. You remember this is the names that I wanted to print it out, so I'm just going to use the names. And over here I'm just going to pass the names because the argument for the ArrayList collection was a string array. So hopefully that is going to work. So I'm going to hit this execute, and you can see that the name is Karthik, name is Prashant, name is Bob is coming out from this method. And the reason why is because it is storing all the value, and then it's going to print all the value for me using the iteration and how it stores the values there. And you may ask, like, Karthik, how can I actually print all the value directly instead of using all these iterators and other thingy? Well, you can use a for loop as well if you wanted to, or you can even use a for each loop to do that. So you can just say for each of var name, and you can use the name variable here as well, because the name scope, the variable's name scope ends in the for loop itself. So you can use in different for loop the same name variable, and the scope just works, doesn't matter. And I'm gonna say name collection, and then if I just open and close the braces, something like that, and over here I can just say system.out.println of the same thing. I can just copy this and I can just say name, and this should do as well. You don't really have to do all these things over here. I just wanted to show you like how it actually can be done using the iterator. But if you don't have an iterator, you can do the exact same thing, and the code is just going to work pretty much like how this is doing over here. So this is from for each, just in case to differentiate, so that you can understand that the method is actually working. So you can even do this one, like for each loop as well. And remember, I was telling you that shorthand for each is so good while you work with the collections, and that's what I'm actually doing it over here. You can do that as well. You can use this iterator, or you can directly use a for each to do the exact same operation, and it is even more simpler. So that is how you do it with the ArrayList. All right, the last collection which I wanted to share this time today is going to be what is called as a dictionary kind of operation, which is going to be like a key and value pair. So I'm telling you what I really mean about that. So if I just start writing one more method here, just give some name, like a room here, so that you can see what I'm trying to type. So I'm going to make this as public static void, and I'm going to say like a HashMap collection. And I'm going to pass the exact same string array of names. And over here, I'm going to start writing the what is called as an HashMap collection, something like this. And now over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this class called as HashMap. If I just do control space, you see that it is also coming from the java.util package. And over here, I can just specify the K and V, which is nothing but the key and the value that I wanted to do. So a key can be a type. It can be of any type. If it's an object type, it's a type which you wanted to specify to retrieve the value that you're looking for. For instance, if you have got this name, you know that first name is going to be Karthik, second name is going to be Prashant, and third name is going to be Bob. Right? So if I want to get the second name, you either iterate through the collection to get that value, or you have to specify the index. But what if you know that, okay, you know what, Bob is number 3 on that particular list. If you just specify 3, and if you get that value out directly, which is great. And what if in collections you want to keep on adding multiple different names, and tomorrow the Bob's value in the index changes? You can't get the value exactly, right? Like now, if you specify the key that you always know to access him, then you can just specify the key so that you can get the value always, even though the index changes. That is the power of this HashMap collection, where it is going to store a key and value of all the names that you're looking for. I'll tell you what I really mean about that. So if I just specify, let's say, not integer this time, just for a change, I want to make the key as string and the value as string as well. And I'm going to say that it's going to be a name collection is equal to new of the hash map, something like that. And now I want to store the value. And again, as I told you, because the JCF has already streamlined the way that you store the values in all these collections, the method names are almost remain the same, but just that this time it is going to be put instead of add method, right? Because in ArrayList we use add as the method name to store the values into the collection, but here you actually need to use what is called as a put to store the value. But you see that you do it via the key and value pair, something like that. I mean, there are even more methods this time over here for this particular collection, but yeah, you will just understand while you start using these collections. It's going to be just straightforward. It's very easier to understand that add is to add the value, put is still going to put into the collection, so pretty much like an adding a value in there. So yeah, that's what it is. But as that said, I'm going to use this put method over there, and I'm going to pass the key and value pair. So what is the key that we have to pass in? So here the key is basically going to be let's say emp01 as the key, and maybe the E is small letter. I'm just gonna make things even more straightforward. So if the key is emp01, then it is going to be Karthik, for instance. So I'm gonna say Karthik over here, right? And if it is going to be emp02, then you know who it is. It is going to be Prashant. And if it is emp03, then it is going to be Bob. And if it is going to be something else, let's say emp04, it is going to be Sri. And if it is emp05, then it is going to be, let's say, Adya. Something like that. I'm just making it up. And once you have all these employees information over here, you can always get these values out from the collection using its what is called as a key value. So now let's say if I want to get the Adya from the collection, all I have to do this time is I don't have to get through the entire collection and get that specific value. I can just specify the key to get that value out. So cool, right? Like you just have to specify this system.out.println, and you just say the employee name for emp05, which is going to be, you just have to say name collection dot get, and just specify. See, this get is a method which is going to get that specific key for you. And you see that the IntelliSense also says that the object, you need to pass it as key there. So you just have to specify here as emp05, and now that should get you Adya out from the collection. So if you don't believe me, that's how you do it. And now if you just go back to our first program.java over here, and I'm just gonna comment this line, and I'm just gonna say collection learning dot HashMap, and of course we don't really have to pass the names this time from the collection to the collection, because we are storing all the names straight away directly over here. So we just can make this as like an no argument method, and this way there is no argument required. And now if I try to run this code, you'll notice that it's going to get the emp05 as Adya. It's going to take that immediately, because you just have to specify the key to get the value out. So if I specify, let's say 3 for the employee 3, and if I execute this, immediately it's going to tell me that the employee 03 is going to be Bob, because it's storing all the value into a hash map as a dictionary, kind of dictionary, right? Because it knows the key, then it knows what the value is. So if you just have to specify the key, it's going to get you the value out of it. So that's how things are going to be. So that's about the way that you can get the value out of this one. I mean, you can now do the exact same thing with the collections as well. I mean, the for each loop as well. So all you have to do it is, if I want to print all the value, I can just say for var name of the name collection, something like that. I can just specify it over here. And all you have to do this time over here is that this entry set over here, like this, that's going to get all the entry out from this particular collection. And now over here, you can just print all the values using the system.out.print. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it over here, the employee name, like that. And I can just specify the name here. And you see that we have two options this time, get key and get value. So you can do that as well. So you can just say the employee name for plus, and I'm going to say name dot get value. And then I'm going to say is, see, I'm trying two concatenation of string this time, because I can get the key dynamically and the value dynamically as well. So I'm going to say name dot get value, like that. So this way it's going to print both the key and value for me. So I'm going to comment this line of code. And now if I try to run this code, see, guess what happens over here this time? It's just going to say the employee name for EMP02 is Prashant, for 3 is Bob, and 1 is Karthik, and 4 it is Sri, and 5 it is Adya. So it's going to be printing all the things for you over here immediately. And this is all happening because you're actually seeing that these are all value coming directly from the collection, which is being iterated through using this entry set method. And now you may notice that, hey, Karthik, why is this employee 02 is printed first for Prashant, and 3 is printed, and then Karthik is being printed third time over here? Like, why the order is entirely different? Because this is an unordered list. As I told you on the slide, we just gave a bit of an attention there. I was telling you that it's an unordered list, and there was something called as an ordered list. So basically this hash map is an unordered list, which means it's going to bring you all the values regardless of any order that you store. And it also brings in any order that you're going to be getting the value out for as an output. But if you want to get exactly the same order like how you stored, then you should not be using the hash map, which is an unordered list. Rather, you should be using what is a linked hash map. So I'm going to say linked hash map and make this as a linked hash map as well. And this is going to be an ordered list for you. See, this is, if I try to run this code, it is going to print exactly the same order that the value is being stored into this collection. So if I try to run this code, you notice that it's always going to print Karthik, Prashant, Bob, Sri, and Adya in the exact same order like how it is being stored into the collection. So that is how this thing is actually being done over here. So I hope you got the idea like how this is actually being done, right? And the last operation which I'm going to do before we end this particular collection discussion and this whole core Java concept is to introduce a bit of a functional programming. I mean, I'm going to confuse you this time. So if you just wanted to avoid from this confusion, just stop this video right away and then say, thank you, Karthik. I'm going to get into the Selenium thing right now. But if you wanted to get even more hardcore, Java also has got some sort of functional programming style of writing the same for each loop for this particular hash map. So the way you can do it is, instead of you doing the coding something like this, so I'm going to say control slash, and over here, I'm just going to say name collection dot, and see there is something called, if I just hit dot and if I just say for, there is something like for each as well. So there is a keyword or a method kind of for each loop there, where you can also specify the key and value, something like this. And then you can use a lambda expression. As I told you, right? Like this is going to confuse you a bit. So if you want to stay away from this, I would highly recommend you to do so. Just feel free to do it. But this is another way that you can do it. So it's going to get you the key and value out into this particular variables, and now you can just print the value like what I did over here. But instead of using the method names like key and value, you can just say the employee name for, I can just specify the key, and then the value is going to be value. So this way it actually proves the point that we can also use this for each method like a functional programming style, and it actually comes from the streaming library of Java. So I'm just going to save this particular code over here. And now if I try to run this, you can see that it is going to do the exact same thing like how we did before. But just that the way that you use the for each loop is a bit different from what you are quite familiar with. So that is what is another way of you doing it. But only thing is, like, instead of using the for keyword, you are using a for each method, which is there in the collection itself, which is quite awesome. So you can do this way as well. So that's the end of the collections, guys. So hope you got the idea, like how we can store the value into the collection, retrieve the value out from the collection using the iterator or using the for each loop, and how we can store the values, a key value pair in the hash map, and also get an ordered value out using the linked hash map, and how we use the for each with the entry set for the for each method in the hash map, or using the for each method which is built in as a streaming library inside the collections for in order to do like a Java's functional programming style using this for each method. So hope we have discussed everything that is required for you to get into some of the programming things for the Selenium automation testing. So starting our next lecture, we are going to talk about Selenium with Java from a complete ground up. That's going to be an introduction, and we're going to start setting up things in Java with Selenium, and we will see how we can bombard everything with whatever that we have learned. So now we have quite a good foundational knowledge of Java. I think this is the best place for you to start into or get into Selenium automation testing so that you can start writing automation test code. And with that, thank you so much for this journey until now. So catch you in the next lecture where we're going to start talking about Selenium with Java. See you soon.